Mark Hornbeck, one of the people that I read every single day that he's published in the Detroit News. He's the Lansing bureau chief, and listen to this lead this morning in his story. It was a mad scramble Monday across Michigan for the 7 candidates vying to be the next governor as they tried to sway undecided voters and get them out to the polls today. One of the things I appreciate most about your writing, Mark, is it's very crisp, very clean, and very direct. And as you watch the media world these days, you don't always get that kind of writing.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that.
How do you think, without making a prediction, what's your sense on the way this gubernatorial race is going on both the Republican and Democrat side? Do you expect to be up late tonight?
I do, especially on the Republican side. You've got 4 candidates who I think have a realistic chance to win this thing, although some better chances than others. And, you know, the Democratic side, while the conventional wisdom now has Bernero, Lansing Mayor Verge Bernero with a lead, it certainly is not outside the realm of possibility that Dillon could pull it out. So it's such an unusual primary election in Michigan where you've got 2 contests and nobody can really predict with any certainty who's going to win this thing on the day of the primary. I don't think it's ever happened before.
When it comes to converting polling data to primary votes, is that more difficult to do than it is, say, in the general election? When you look at a poll leading up to the general, is the primary less predictable?
It is, because you have to somehow ferret out who's going to vote in a primary. In a general, you know, everybody can vote. You can split your ticket. You know, it's an easier job to find voters in a poll. In a primary, you can't, for example, you can't measure, as Ann Arbor businessman Rick Snyder is trying to woo independents and Democrats to vote for him in a Republican primary. Well, the polls aren't going to measure that, because if you're polling for the Republican primary and the respondent says that he or she is a Democrat, then the pollster immediately says, "Well, thanks for your time."
Mm-hmm.
So it's dicier to figure out who's going to vote in a primary and how to measure that.
What's been the biggest surprise, you think, so far in this gubernatorial primary election?
Well, I would say probably the biggest surprise was John Cherry getting out in January, which kind of changed the dynamics of the entire primary election. Not only did it drastically alter the Democratic field, you no longer had the anointed heir apparent in the race. It also affected how the Republicans can run the race, because no longer did they have Granholm administration lieutenant, which would allow them to run against the continuation of the Granholm record.
Do you think John Cherry wishes he'd stayed in?
Well, I don't know. I've talked with John Cherry once or twice recently, and he seems pretty contented.
Do you think the Manoogian Mansion suspicions or fallout will hurt Attorney General Cox at the polls today?
You know, I think it can't help but have some kind of effect, but I don't think it's going to be a determinant factor. I think people have pretty much made up their minds quite a while ago whether or not there even was a party at the Manoogian or not, and whether or not that might affect their votes. Certainly, it will have more impact in the Metro Detroit area than it does out here, but you know, I don't think it's a huge factor in the race.
All right, thank you very much. We'll read you in the Detroit News. I know it's a long day for you, and we appreciate you being up early this morning chatting with us.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All the best to Mark Hornbeck, the Lansing bureau chief for the Detroit News.